Hello and welcome back to the Q&A. So just before we get into the Q&A, I want to talk about just some general channel stuff and what's going on in World of Warcraft at the minute. I know it's been a little bit of a dry spot recently in terms of there just being fun stuff to talk about. Patch 6.1 so far hasn't actually got that much content in it. They still need to push the Iron Docks onto the PTR, so hopefully we'll see that soon enough. But yeah, I suppose really January and this, beginning in February has been a pretty slow month for World of Warcraft. It's at that stage where 6.0 is a little bit long in the tooth, and we're kind of waiting for something interesting to happen. Now, I am currently just sort of up at university. We sort of start term late, which means that it's going to take a few days to get things sort of sorted out and ready, but I am planning on getting some fun guides out, some fun lore videos out, and then also some videos that are basically a hybrid of a guide and a countdown, because sometimes there's lots of little things which you want to do a guide for, and it just makes sense to do it all in one big video. So let me know what you think about that stuff, and let's get right into the Q&A. So first of all, I've got a question from Raydark, who said, what do you think of going back to Wrath of the Lich King style reputations, giving storyline dailies and a tabard that you can wear in dungeons that gives you a small amount of rep? Alright, great question actually, because reputations are kind of a hot topic at the minute. So in Mists of Pandaria, the big thing was they kind of doubled down on daily quests, forgot about tabards, and all that stuff, which led to all the problems that are so well documented, there's no point in going over them. And then, of course, in Warlords of Draenor, they just decided, you know what, professions, dailies, reps, screw the whole lot of them, we don't need them. And now we're just grinding mobs, because Emperor Xiao Hao, that was some fun stuff. I mean, we all loved it, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with the odd Xiao Hao thing, but when it's only that, well, it kinda sucks. So back in Wrath of the Lich King, one thing about reputations is that a few of them were kind of necessary for shoulder enchants, though they did a very good job of ensuring that those were actually bound on account. And that was, I think, the saving grace of the Wrath of the Lich King style of reputations. Yes, there was a lot of stuff to do, but if you were a raider, right, and you just needed them for access to, like, the enchants, you never really felt like it was absolutely mandatory to do them in every single alt because you could just mail stuff because it was bind on account. That was a really, really, really good system because it allowed for each reputation to have plenty of content and plenty of meat to it, and while still not punishing people who had alts, because of course what's happened since Wrath of the Lich King, and I think this is something that people don't really talk about, is that people have got more high-level characters. I think as times went on with World of Warcraft, it's no longer you and your character, because that is definitely how it used to feel back in the day. Maybe you had one or two alts, but if you had, like, a full roster of level 80 characters, you were, I think, more in the minority than you are these days, where, because of the level 90 boost, heirlooms, combined with, things like the Elixir of Ancient Knowledge, and then just general nerfs to XP requirements, it's very easy to get high-level characters, and, of course, leveling through Draenor is a super quick process. So because of all that, I think we've got more characters, so would a Wrath of the Lich King style rep system work, where each rep has got loads of daily quests, maybe some story stuff? Well, if they were to put the important rewards, or at least make them account bound, then sure, I think it would work. And when you think about it, right, things like, say, mounts, well, they're account bound already, so honestly, I think, yeah, Wrath of the Lich King style reputations absolutely could work. Now, if they were doing them again, I would say more storyline stuff, yeah, okay, do a few daily quests, because that's, some people like that, okay? But it's all about variation. That's the biggest problem with the Warlords reps for me. There's no variation in them. So I would say let people do something, like a limited amount of grinding. I don't think it should be okay to just grind the whole rep in like 12 hours. I don't think that's maybe the best kind of gameplay to encourage. Leads to burnout and all that stuff, but I suppose now we're getting into the realms of social engineering and all that stuff. But essentially, what you want to do with reps is have variation, so dailies, story stuff, maybe a tabard for, for running dungeons. You don't want to make it feel too much like sort of queue Lords of Draenor, where you're just queuing up for things all the time. But yeah, lots of variation so that people can tackle the reps in the way that they want, and I think that's a pretty good way of doing them. And of course, more reps. I mean, come on, Warlords of Draenor has got a, just frankly, pathetic number of reps. Look at what they were doing with past expansions. You had loads of reps, loads of mounts, you had some, just, various little cool things going about the place. I actually think the Argent Tournament stuff, if it was maybe slightly better designed, was, could have been a lot better, but I think Argent Tournament itself was actually a good bit of content. I just suppose that, well, perhaps people who had loads of alts maybe are a little bit jaded against that because it was a hell of a thing to do if you had loads of alts. But perhaps something like the Argent Tournament that had less, maybe, gating applied to it via collecting loads and loads of tokens over like a 25-day period. Maybe something like that could work. I would love to see them put a lot of effort into a reputation though, rather than just make it a series of 4 daily quests that you can do or just grinding out mobs. Because one big difference is that you used to go and do a reputation, and that was a different form of gameplay because you were doing quests, maybe you were hunting for netherwing eggs or something like that. Whereas now, doing a reputation is the exact same as doing a Rapexis daily. That means that sort of 2 bits of content that usually were a very different thing to do are now sort of the same. It's a bit homogenized together, and I think that does hurt the game, and it maybe hurts the variety of the gameplay experience when you are at max level. So it's a little bit of a pity. Fundamentally, I think, yes, they should look back to how reputations were done. If they do put anything of like player power in reputations, they should consider making some of that stuff account bound, because obviously, you know, alt problems. And overall, yeah, it could definitely work. So next I've got a question from Ash Gamer, who asked if I think Cataclysm is better or worse than Mists of Pandaria. As much as it is really trendy to hate on Mists of Pandaria, I do think it was a better expansion than Cataclysm, and in terms of my reasoning, well, I just found that I was playing the game more in Mists of Pandaria. I thought Siege of Orgrimmar was a fantastic raid. I really liked Throne of Thunder as well, and while I didn't enjoy Heart of Fear, I did like Terrace of the Eternal Springs or whatever, just not the final boss. It was absolute shit. And of course, Mokshan Vaults I think was a really good raid, and Elegon still is one of the fights that I enjoyed the most because I just thought it was fun, you know. So yeah, I'd say from a raiding perspective, I definitely did prefer Mists of Pandaria over Cataclysm. In terms of Cataclysm stuff, well, like from what I hear, Firelands was a really good raid. I personally enjoyed Bastion of Twilight and the other one quite a bit, and everything that I've heard about the other two, or the other Dragon Soul, is that it's kind of pants. So make of that what you will. I'll say that it was cool having dungeons added in mid-expansion with Cataclysm in terms of the those like Deathwing ones at the very end. I think they were pretty cool, as were the ones from Wrath of the Lich King. I like the idea of doing that, but they're just a subtle hint, you know, for some point in Warlords. But yeah, I do think that overall Mists of Pandaria was more enjoyable. That said, you know, there were a lot of periods in Cataclysm where I didn't play the game, so maybe my opinion isn't the most valid. I definitely did jump in for every patch to see what was going on. I think the whole Rage of the Firelands thing was pretty cool with its like big daily hub. That stuff was kind of fun. But there was just something about Cataclysm, I'm not too sure exactly what it was. I'd have to look back at it. I think that when the dungeon nerfs came in, that kind of... a part of it sort of sucked because I was having a great time in those dungeons with my guild, and there wasn't really any viable alternative after they were completely gutted. There was something about those raids which, for some reason, I just burnt out faster, even though I did enjoy the first tier of that expansion. I don't know, Cataclysm was just kind of weird in my head. I feel like there just wasn't enough good content, like in patch, I believe, 4.0. Yeah, 4.0 just didn't really have enough stuff. At least in 5.0, yeah, the daily problem was a thing, but at that stage, I didn't have a million alts, and though I absolutely did despise leveling up in Mists of Pandaria, I hated that so much. I think they are, in terms of leveling, some of the worst zones Blizzard have made. Some of them are kind of pretty, many of them are just green marshy forests, and I thought it was really boring. But when I did hit level 90, it was soon after patch 5.1, so there's a lot of content to do there. I enjoyed the patch 5.1 story quest stuff, thought that was really cool. I sort of drove myself insane farming up the Golden Lotus rep because I was a leather worker and wanted to make myself some gear, so that bit kind of sucked, and yes, the daily problems were totally a thing, and I wouldn't say got burnt out, I just stopped doing them after 2 weeks, but I never really felt like it was a giant chore, although obviously if I had multiple alts at the time, yeah, it would have been a ginormous problem, and I have not done those reps on any alts since. But yeah, so 5.0, 5.1 were pretty fun. I've really enjoyed Mokushan Vaults, and some of the Heart of Fear progression was okay, and mainly I enjoyed Terrace though. But then, of course, Throne of Thunder I thought was a really cool raid. I liked the whole island thing that they had going on, I liked the rare mobs, and the treasure run thing. I thought that stuff was all really cool, and just the bosses I really enjoyed for the most part. Though I've got to say, the 10-player difficulty balancing was really, really out of whack, where the first half of the instance felt far harder than much of the last half. It was very bizarre. So that happened. Then, of course, patch 5.3 arrived. I thought it was pretty good, actually, in terms of a ideas perspective, but in terms of what actually came into the game, it was sort of done with, I'd say in 2 weeks for most people. You did your weekly quest, and then you were just sort of, well, that's Battlefield Barons done then. So it was pretty light in content, but I think it brought in some really cool ideas, and I think that patch 5.3, but sort of ramped up to 11, could make a fantastic patch if they really wanted to try to bring a Warzone alive. So more NPCs, more side objectives, more just various things to do, and more rewards. And then, of course, better loot balancing. As for patch 5.4, well, I sort of enjoyed the time in the Isle for quite a bit, but the problem was it obviously is not a bit of content that was designed to last for 14 months, so it very quickly got old. And I'd say that Mr. Pandaria overall would have been a good expansion, like a very good expansion, maybe if it just hadn't have had that big weight at the end. So I suppose final answer is Mr. Pandaria was more fun to me than Cataclysm, though Wrath was more fun than any of the other expansions for me, including Warlords of Draenor, and the Burning Crusade is an expansion that I sadly just didn't get to do enough of the high-end content in. I was level 70 for a while, I was doing PvP, and I had a great time, so all I can say for that is I had a great time. I don't really feel right ranking it because I didn't get to go to Sunwell or Hyjal or Black Temple or any of that stuff bar Karazhan when it was current content. And finally, let's just polish it off with a lore question from Zeke Klein, who said, where is Maiev Shadowsong? Alright, pretty simple one actually. So we know her lore up to the Burning Crusade very well because Illidan, dies and says, oh well, you know what, the hunter's nothing without the hunted. Hang on, other way around. The hunter is nothing without the hunted. He dies, and she says, oh no, my purpose is gone. And then apparently, some say that she went mad, but essentially we next see her pop up in a post-Cataclysm book called Wolfheart. Basically, all the Alliance leaders are chilling out in Darnassus, talking about getting the Worgen in, and at the same time, I think it's just after some of the Highborn had been introduced into the Night Elf Society, which I'm pretty sure explains why the Night Elves can have mages. But anyway, one of them gets murdered. As it turns out, Maiev had something to do with it. She ends up getting sort of caught, apprehended by her brother, Jarod, who beats her in a fight, but refuses to kill her, so she escapes. And now she's just sort of ran away, I suppose. And a bunch of people hypothesize that she's went a little bit mad. So really all we know is that she is now on the run, and maybe they'll pick up her character sometime in the future. It probably does make sense that they do, though, because there's definitely some interesting, lore interactions that could happen there, and perhaps it could have a bit of a role to play in some sort of future patch. Anyway, that has been it for the Q&A. Thanks for listening. If you have got a question, then leave it down in the comments for this video. And with all that said, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.